Alright, so continuing my weekend theme of films that nobody fucking heard about, we have this one. So I was very side to side on whether or not I was going to try to give this one the time of day from the trailer. Again, this is another one like Wedding Year that had no press. And when I say no press, let me clarify something. When I say no press, what I mean is I have the Malco Theater app on my phone, and I routinely check it to see what's coming out. I go to the coming soon section and see what's coming out, because I'm always looking for what's the next film I'm going to review. What am I going to go to this weekend? All right. So when I say absolutely no press, what I am saying is that not only no trailers, no commercials, no word, it doesn't even list these things on the coming soon thing on an app. Just suddenly they're in a theater, and then within a week or two, they're gone. So that's what I mean when I say no press. So this one, again, I watched the trailer for, and what was going to get me into the seat was more the people in it. So has Keira Knightley, Matt Smith, Ray Fiennes, so a really good cast. What was keeping me away from it was a couple things. Number one, British film, which British films go one of two ways: either very dry, interesting but slow. Let's say that. They're interesting but slowly paced, or really, really good. And their political ones tend to ease towards the interesting but dry category for me. That, and you know what, folks? I lived through all this shit in the early 2000s. I was there. I remember it all. We're still hearing it. We're still living with the consequences of this shit almost 20 years later. I wasn't real keen to go back to the well on this one. Kind of like people who were, at Pearl Harbor never really liked to see World War II movies, And again, not just, 9/11 and the immediate aftermath, but I was there for we want to go to war, everybody's against the war, they lied to get us to war, well, now we're in the war. All of that emotional bullshit, that we all went through and are still going through as a result, I was there. It was not something that I was real anxious to kind of come back to. But here's the thing. I finally just decided, let's go for it. Last day, it's going to be in town. Let's do it and just see what happens. And I am very happy I did. This film comes down very hard on the other end of the British movie spectrum. Really fucking good. It's a really good movie. So if you haven't heard of it, which I'd be surprised if you had, here's the basic skinny. So in the kind of pre-Iraq II war, whatever we're calling it, I don't even know what we're calling it, the Iraq War, I guess, in the months and years kind of leading up to it, right before everything was declared, a British intelligence agent, played by Keira Knightley, leaked a memo that was sent to her from her higher-ups saying that America and the British government wanted to start spying on UN allies so that they could get information, so that they could start strong-arming those allies into backing the war with Iraq so they could get the UN vote. So she leaks this to the newspaper. It gets into the newspaper, and she is caught or gives herself up as the whistleblower, and then is tried for treason, or looks like they're going to be trying her for treason. So the film is really well put together and structured in a unique way. It's almost like three movies in one. Any one of these sections could have been a movie in and of itself. So you have part one, her kind of coming across this information, making the moral decision to blow the whistle, as it were. Then you have part 2, the reporters, led by Matt Smith, for one of the British newspapers, doing the research and tracking down the leads and all that on the story before breaking the story. Then the how the story was discredited, because before it went to print, this was an interesting tidbit. The story they ran was discredited because, okay, the memo that was originally set all this off obviously was sent from an American source. So when they typed it up, one of the workers at the newspaper ran it through a British spell check and respelled a lot of the words in the British way. They use more, they use more O's and U's in certain words. And so when it came out, they were discrediting it as, it was a hoax because this wasn't how Americans spell words. So it's that whole section. Then Act 3 is the fallout. What happens to her after. So let's talk about the good stuff. First of all, really tight directing. The movie is long, I will say that. It started to drag a bit, but while it dragged, it was never dull. Sometimes British films can drag and they can get dull, but this one dragged a little bit, but I was still really interested in everything. So the direction is really tight, really well done. It's the best kind of political thriller, if you want to call it that. Best type of political movie, let's say that. In that it makes a lot of this talk about back alley deals and, laws and scoff laws and broken laws and all this very technical legal jargon sound really interesting and thrilling. It's a spy movie with no guns going off, So that's difficult to do, so I applaud them for that. Acting-wise, it's a British movie. So the acting is going to be top-notch, and you got some of the best of their generation working here. Keira Knightley, I'm always impressed with her. She is one of these actors who I feel like she should be a bigger star than she is, but I think she's very happy doing these smaller pieces that we see her in a lot. And it seems like they give her a great opportunities to stretch herself and play a multitude of different characters and not always be playing the same character over and over and over again, which would probably have happened to her if she'd stayed kind of a Hollywood big shot. I'm always also impressed. One of the guys, I don't know why I'm impressed, but Ralph Fiennes, who plays her lawyer, he's in that camp with guys like Gary Oldman, who play villains one minute and then saints the next, and does both just so fucking well. Like, you can't touch him. The guy who really I had the hardest time with, and this is not due to him, was Matt Smith. And that is not because he's a bad actor. He's very good in this. But God help me, I identify him so much as the Doctor. I am sorry. We talked in my auditions. I had an audition workshop for some of the kids right before auditions for the fall show, and I was talking about their isms. The things that actors do in everyday life or in all their roles that is immediately identified as that's a so-and-so-ism. That's a thing that is not the character, but the actor. And boy, I don't know if Matt Smith just has a lot of isms, or if what he did for the Doctor was just so ingrained in him. But there's just so many. The way he kind of hangs his head, the way the hair kind of falls over his eyes, the little looks he gives out of the corner of his eyes. I swear any second I was waiting for him to whip out a sonic screwdriver and save the day. So I want to be clear about this. He's not bad in this. He's very, very good. It is very interesting to hear the Doctor say fuck, so I will admit that. But he's very, very good in this. But I think he might need to take a little look at his isms and maybe try to cipher some of them out a little bit so that it's not just the Doctor we always see. Because it's not just the face, it's the mannerisms. You know, I think he might need to look at that a little bit more. But again, stressing, Matt Smith is damn good. He's damn good in this film. I really like him. So the acting is top-notch. The story is very interesting, very multi-layered. I mean, America is kind of the big bad here, which, you know, guilty. I mean, I can't really complain about that. We fucking are. I don't know anymore. But it is kind of nice to see one of these movies where the British government are just as big a bunch of shitheads. You know, it's nice to know. One thing I can always rely on, you know, British cop shows and British, you know, movies like this, is that it's nice to know that we're not the only shitheads in the world. Sometimes it sure feels like it. You know, especially these days. However, I digress. There are some things that bugged me about the movie. And these are things, it's always hard to nitpick things like this, because when you see the words, you know, inspired by a true story or based on a true story, it's always very difficult to tell, you know, what was real and what is dramatic license. So when you nitpick things and, you know, later someone goes, well, that is what actually happened, you're like, well, fuck, you know. So, just a couple of things that nitpicked me. A few things that nitpicked me a little bit about Keira Knightley's character. I get... I'm a liberal, generally speaking. So, I fully get the desire to try to call out a government when they're, you know, when they're fucking lying. But I'm also a big proponent of really considering the long-term consequences of your actions. And she does this for moral reasons, and maybe that's part of the point of the story, is that maybe because she didn't think about it, but then seems surprised that, you know, that all this shit kind of comes her way. You know, seems surprised that the government starts doing dirty tricks to her, like almost deporting her husband. It's like, you didn't think they weren't going to hit you there? You come at them, you do something like that, you admit to it, and you're surprised that this shit happens? Because I think you've kind of forfeited the right to be surprised about things like that. You know, her lawyers do this whole scene where they're telling her, we're going to have to plead guilty to this. We're going to have to do it. And she's like, well, I'm not going to do that because I don't have a criminal record that follows me the rest of my life. Yes, honey, but you fucking did it. So what you're saying, and this is a personal preference for me, so please understand. First of all, I applaud the real person for what she did. I really do. I don't want to make it sound like I'm not saying she shouldn't have done it or anything. But what I'm saying from a dramatic standpoint, or even from a personal standpoint, is that you're calling out your government for lying and sending your nation to war unjustly as you see it, or as it was, but I'm trying to be even-handed here. So you're calling them out for this, that, and the other thing. But then you, at a trial where you knowingly broke the law, are now going to try to circumvent that law or get around that law. Doesn't that, on a smaller scale, obviously, but doesn't that make you a little bit of a hypocrite? If you did it, shouldn't you stand up and say, I did it and I will accept the consequences of my actions? Because I did do it. I'm not ashamed that I did it. But I'm going to, I'm not going to hide it. Isn't the, the whole, no, I'm not going to plead not guilty thing, isn't that to a lesser extent, obviously, almost exactly the same thing that you're accusing these people of doing? Isn't it? Just a little? I don't know. I tend to think, my personal belief, so please understand that, a hero is somebody who makes the hard choice and then takes the consequence for it. Doesn't try to weasel out of the consequence. And I'm not saying, and weaseling out's the wrong word, but I don't know. It was a thing that I just, when they were having that scene, it was like, but you did it. You knew you did it. You've admitted to doing it. So now you're going to get up there and say, I did it, but I'm not guilty, even though every piece of evidence says you are. So that kind of bugged me. That's a little thing. Here's another thing that bugged me. I had a Molly's Game flashback while watching this. So, part of the stuff they're holding her on is that she didn't send this thing to the press directly. She sent it to a friend of hers who, again, she was only on screen for a little bit, and they would put up little title cards about who everybody was, so you knew. And I cannot remember who this one was, but it was a friend of hers who was in the anti-war movement. I think she was ex-intelligence, and that person gave it to another person who was a reporter who had been kidnapped in Iraq or Afghanistan or somewhere, and then converted to Muslim after being released. It was a little bit of a confusing paper trail. But the point is, there were other people kind of in the interim that played a part in this that she would not give up. Okay, fine. I'm for that. That's fine. Very House on American Activities, or Un-American Activities kind of thing. Very Kale Gunner Joe. Not giving up anybody else. I respect that. Mad points. Here's my thing, though, and again, this is just a call out to maybe the real folks. I think it's kind of cowardly that her friends there didn't step up. I really do. And I remember the scene in Molly's Game where part of the whole plot of that is that the government, again, wanted Jessica Chastain to give up all these names to the people who were in her poker game, and she wouldn't do it. And all they want were those names, and she refused to do it. And her lawyer, Idris Elba, has this scene where he screams at her and goes, where are all these people? Where are these people who you're willing to lay down your life for? Where are they? Why are you protecting them when they're not protecting you? Not one of them has come forward and say, hey, I'll back you up, or I'll give you help, or anything like that. They're willing to let you twist in the wind, but you're protecting them. And there was this part of me that was watching this going, it's kind of the same thing. These two friends of hers wouldn't come out and say, hey, I'm the one who took it. I'm the one who sent it there. I'm the middleman. She's putting her life and her freedom on the line for principles and to protect your ass, and you can't be bothered to do the same. Again, I don't think these are necessarily problems with the movie. I really don't have any real problems with the movie, aside from the fact that it drug a little bit in the middle. These are just minor details about the fucked up situation that were kind of getting to me. But yeah, I actually have no real problem with this movie. I think I was ready to have problems with this movie, but excuse me. But I can't honestly sit here and say one of the things I even really liked about this movie was one of the things I thought I was going to hate about it. Because the trailer makes it look like, as much as a liberal as I am, I also don't like films that let one side or the other, liberal or conservative, get up on their soapbox and just go, we're right, we're perfect, everything we do is great, rah, rah, rah. That's kind of the problem I had with the press movie, I think it was, with Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep last year. That's one of the problems I had with that film. It was very kind of, oh, yeah, yes, and what I liked about this film is it was not shy about the fact of showing she did all this and fucking failed. She failed to stop it. The war still happened, is still happening. and she fucking failed. You know, it wasn't afraid to kind of say, you know, and I wish they might have dwelled on that a little bit more, kind of just a little bit, but they did do some great scenes with all of the characters kind of going, you know, we blew it, you know, it didn't work. We tried to stop it, and it, you know, and kind of the hopelessness and what I like is narratively that led to the next stage of, okay, now we just got to try to save this person's life. She sacrificed everything to try to stop this war. It didn't work. We got to try to save something, you know. So this film really was well done. I kind of wish I would have seen it earlier, just so I could have recommended it earlier, so maybe a few more people might have gone and seen it. But I, unlike Matt Smith, am not a time traveler. It would be cool if I was, but sadly. That all being said, you know, media is readily available. So if you're curious, final grade, I'm going an A+ on this one. I think really tight, really well done, fabulously acted, well written. I don't have a lot of things outside of minor nitpicks to complain about. It really was an engaging political thriller, and I really enjoyed it. So an A+ on this one. So I recommend that you seek this one out in a few months when it's available for streaming or DVDs if you're like me and still love, you know, physical media. Check it out. I think you'll like it. Alrighty. So, happy I spent the weekend checking out some lesser known films. Maybe we brought some attention to them, maybe not, but it still feels good. So, thanks for joining me. Maybe next week we'll check out some of these bigger name pictures. So until then, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies. That's becoming a thing. I don't know if I like that. Anyway, so long.